There's a huge problem happening in businesses today, and some businesses don't even know what it is. And I've asked our special guest, Maura, to join us to share what's happening in businesses today. Maura Thomas, welcome to Fordify Live. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other things, as well as the Business Growth Show podcast. Anyway, welcome to the show, Maura. What's this big problem that people are overlooking?
Yeah, so many of my clients don't realize this issue that I have discussed in my latest book called Everyone Wants to Work Here. The issue is distraction. Distraction is costing employees time. It is costing companies millions of dollars. And so many people either don't recognize it, or if they do recognize it, they just take the attitude of, well, this is just the way the world is today. And I completely reject that premise. And there's a really strong case in the book about why everyone can reject that premise.
Well, what do you think is really going on? I mean, what is causing so much employee discontent?
Yeah, I think that because the office environment, whether you work at home or whether your team works at home or whether they work in an office, we have people coming up to us if you're in the office all day long. Hey, do you got a minute? You got a minute? You got a minute? There's like yelling over cubicle walls. And even if you have a quiet office, there's still 17 different ways that people can contact you, right? There's text, there's voicemail, there's email, there's chat, there's DMs, there's all of these things. And so we are distracted all day long. And so what people say is, well, this is just the way it is. So I have to figure out how to get my work done in spite of that. Well, the way that I call that an unconscious calculation. I just got to figure out how to get my work done, right? And so the way that they come up with to get their work done is, well, I'll just do that when nobody's bothering me. Well, the only time people aren't bothering you, or at least bothering you less, is 4 a.m., 10 p.m., Saturdays, Sundays, weekends, right? And so what we're essentially saying, it's an unconscious calculation because nobody wakes up on Monday morning and says, oh, I can't wait to work late tonight and every night this week and all weekend too, right? But we say, well, I'll just wait till nobody's bothering me. But the only time people aren't bothering you is during non-work time. And so what we've created is an environment where people can't get their work done at work.
I echo that. I mean, one of the things I come in and work with my staff all the time, and you've been to our offices, so you know our staff. For those of you watching, we're a fan of Maura's books. You can check them out on Amazon by all means. If you want to increase productivity and take control of your attention management, highly recommend that other book. And her new book, of course, is titled Everyone Wants to Work Here, Attract the Best Talent, Energize Your Team, and Be the Leader in Your Market. Now, here's something that our staff says. I've got a couple of my staff members sitting right here off the camera. Go ahead and wave. They're like, oh no, you turned the camera on. They didn't know they were going to be on camera. But they say this all the time to me. They say, you know what? I'm so busy. I'm busy being busy. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like I got anything done. And what do you say to organizations? And I hear that from my speaking clients when I work with them too. They're busy. They're exhausted. They work all day, but they just don't feel like they're actually getting anything done. What can they do? What steps can they take to identify what's causing it? And how can they actually take action?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I teach overall is a comprehensive workflow management process. I call it empowered productivity. But empowered productivity has many steps, and those steps are sort of the layers in moving people from, oh my gosh, I was busy all day and somehow I got nothing done, to days where they say, oh my gosh, that was such a good day. I got so much done. So I mean, we can dissect some of these if you want, but the first one is...
I want to know, our listeners, we've got listeners here on all different roles. We've got franchise brands and executives and business owners and association members. So everybody wants to get more done. They know they have this challenge. We know that this is infecting every level of the organization. You've got this system because you've actually cracked the code to this thing. And I know that you have to catch an airplane. So we are live, everybody. And so she's got to get to an airplane soon. So I want to make sure she has an opportunity to share her ideas. But what should they do first to really understand how to get off the rat race?
Yeah. So the first component of empowered productivity is attention management. So you need to figure out how to manage your attention, because if you allow constant distractions all day, it feels in the moment, right? Oh, I got an email. I read the email. Check, right? It feels like you did something.
Oh boy, I'm guilty of that.
Right? But at the end of the day, that adds up to nothing. Right? Nobody goes home at the end of the day and says, oh, that was such a good day. I read 200 emails, right? Nobody says that. You need, excuse you.
Yeah, sorry. That's how I felt. That was my inner dialogue. Keep going.
So we need to recognize, yes, I have all these communications I need to stay on top of, but that's just a piece of my work. People say to me like, yeah, but doing this is part of my job. Yeah. Staying on top of those communications is part of your job, but isn't it also part of your job to do all that stuff on your to-do list? And you'll never have the opportunity to be proactive and do the stuff on your task list if you are reactive all day long. And so you have to learn how to manage your attention. So that's sort of foundational, right? And that was covered in my earlier book, Attention Management, How to Create Success and Gain Productivity Every Day. Attention management is foundational. That's the first piece.
All right. So what do you feel is the biggest issue, if you haven't already answered it, that hampers individual and organizational success? I mean, is it just the attention management? Is that really the big problem?
Well, attention management is a big problem. There's individuals' ability to control their attention, but then what I talk about in Everyone Wants to Work Here, which just came out, is the boss is often the biggest problem. Can we go back to your tweet?
No, I don't. No, come on, really? Okay, they're saying yes.
Problem, right?
Yeah, move over there, Devin.
The boss is the biggest problem, because the boss will say things like, you need to be responsive. Well,
hey, who pushed that button?
Right? You need to be responsive. Well, what does that mean? If you would say to me, you need to be responsive, that sounds like I need to be fast with my responses. And if I don't want to just be okay at my job, I want to be really good at my job. So if you want me to be fast, I want to be as fast as I can. And as fast as I can means immediate. Well, if I need to be immediate with every communication, how do I ever get anything else done? Right? And compounding the problem is that leaders don't put communication guidelines into place. And so every email that you receive might be just like CC in case you're interested, or it might be like our biggest client has this huge problem, or it could be anything in between. But the only way you know is to read it. And so one of the other chapters about Everyone Wants to Work Here is about communication guidelines. If every email might be an emergency, then you have to treat email as if it is an emergency. Every email as if it is an emergency. And if you have to treat every email as if it is an emergency, how do you get anything else done?
That's the problem. Yeah.
The answer, that's right. You can't get anything else
right.
done. So you have to have guidelines to say, leaders need to put guidelines into place that say, this is how we communicate. We use this tool in this situation in general. There's exceptions to every rule, of course, but people managing their own attention is not enough. Leaders need to create an environment where the team can do their best work, where the team can go home and say, oh my gosh, that was such a good day. I got so much done. And the culture of the organization and the behavior of the leaders is usually one of the biggest things, or two of the biggest things standing in the team's way.
Yeah, I know it is. And, when I think about Prime Concepts, our agency, as well as my speaking business, we've got email, we've got Microsoft Teams, we've got Zoom, we've got Slack, we've got Teamwork. Then we've got a variety of other processes in place in all different types of cloud services and websites. And so when you think about those leadership, and I know every organization feels this way. I mean, the organizations I work with from a marketing and sales standpoint, the biggest thing always comes up is how do we create a culture where everybody wants to work here, and how do we improve productivity? So you're hitting the nail right on the head of the leadership. So other than, reading your book and putting those, communications guidelines into place, which is a mess thing. And I've got your book on order. So your book just came out. So it hasn't gotten to me yet, but it will. I'll be a fan for it, and we'll have you back on the show to discuss it in more detail. But I really want to go back into that those steps that a leader can do. So if you're a business owner, you own an organization, you own a small business, and we're supposed to put those communication guidelines into place. And I know what happens a lot of times, someone like me, I hire people and I delegate. I delegate that to them. I delegate that to my project manager, to my marketing director, to my media director. I delegate those communications because I want them to do it. And that's the blind leading the blind, right?
Well, no, delegating is fine. Here's the problem, Ford, and let's do a little hot seat
and everybody,
coaching.
full disclosure, she can say whatever she wants. This is a live show. Go ahead, Maura. Give it to me.
We know each other, right?
Yep, we're good.
Here's the problem that I think is true for you, but is true for so many leaders, is that great, you delegate somebody to put those communication guidelines into place, and then you don't follow them.
Okay.
And so
yep, that's true.
A policy isn't a policy if the boss doesn't do it. Right.
That's a tweetable moment. A policy isn't a policy if the boss doesn't do it. There we go. Put Maura Thomas, everybody. And for those of you listening to the podcast, you can check Maura out at Maura Thomas, MauraThomas, MauraThomas.com. Okay. So it's not a policy if the boss doesn't follow it. So I've got some homework. I know to do that. What else? Anything else on that vein?
And yeah, I mean, you don't even have to delegate the policy because I outline the policy in the book. All you have to do is get the team on board, but the most important person to get on board is the boss. And so that's why I think the boss has to be involved in sort of spreading the message throughout the team. And then most importantly, has to model the behaviors, right? So not only doing it reactively, interacting with people reactively, but you need to be proactive with the behaviors. And then when other people don't follow them, you have to sort of mention it, right? Like, hey, I noticed that this was kind of an emergency, but you sent it via email. And so I didn't get it for three hours later because I was doing other things. And so I really need you to like text me if it's an emergency, like those kinds of things, reinforcing until it becomes just second nature, that people start to communicate more effectively because they start to think about, I just got off a consulting call with another large healthcare company, and we were talking about everybody needs to know what to do and why. But if you can teach people to think about what's the most effective way to communicate this piece of information, and like going through the questions, right? Who needs to get it? What specifically do I need from them? When do I need it? How should I communicate it? If you go through those questions, if you just take a few seconds, that thought process becomes second nature, and then it takes no time at all. And now the volume of communication in the organization goes way down, but the efficiency of the communication in the organization goes way up.
So obviously everybody needs to be on the same channel. Everybody has to go off the same sheet of music. And just like me, when I go in and work with a brand in marketing, I need the decision makers, the influencers in the same room, right? Because it doesn't do any good to teach the staff or management if the executive leadership isn't on board. So the same thing with this policy, it's really important. And I know that you've talked about the differences, and this is back from the E-Myth. Michael Gerber had a book out, said, it's important to work on your business than in your business. And I know you've adapted that to it's better to work on business operations than in business operations. Speak to that, into how does someone make it so they can step back and evaluate where the problems are?
Yeah. It's a great question because most leaders are consumed with fighting fires. A lot of leaders and managers spend their time fighting fires, right? All this comes up, it gets escalated from the team. And so now it's my job to solve the problem. I don't think it's the leader's job to fight the fire. I think it's the leader's job to prevent the fire from happening to begin with.
Wow, more tweetable moments. I want you to repeat that. So it's not the leader's job to fight the fire. It's the leader's job to prevent the fire from happening in the first place. I know I talk about a lot. The metaphor I use is, are we wiping up the water on the floor or fixing the crack in the wall? And again, I end up delegating too many of those action steps to my staff, when really I think I'm causing the crack in the wall and then having the team wipe up the water. Is that?
You knew where I was headed with that, right?
Yeah, I know where I'm headed. And I think Alex is taking notes. He doesn't even know he's on camera right now. So whoops, we're back. All right. So
too many times the leader is the fire, right?
Yeah.
But even when the leader isn't the fire, the leader just sort of absorbs the fires. All right, let's solve that problem. All right,
Yeah.
let's solve that problem. All right, let's solve that problem. Because people say to me, well, what other choice do I have? So you have a couple of choices. Number one, you definitely have to think back and say, how did this happen? Number two, I think leaders get involved too much. You don't. You're really good at this, Ford. I know I've been teasing you, but you are really good at this. A lot of leaders will say, well, okay, they came to me with the problem. I got to solve the problem, right? You're really good at saying, figure it out. That's your job.
Yeah,
I'm
I
doing
do.
my
I
job.
definitely would rather. I hired them to do the job. I want to train them to stay. Well, the first rule is hire great people, train them to standard, and create a culture that they can be accountable. Now that looks great on a poster and everything, but that is what we aim for. Now we don't always hit it, but that has certainly helped us.
Yes. So I think too many leaders, though, so there's an article in the Harvard Business Review, most popular article in Harvard Business Review, sadly not one of mine, but most popular article. It's called The Manager and the Monkey, I think it's called, where the idea is the employees' problems are monkeys on their back. And so they come to the boss and they're like, oh, here's this thing, I'm not sure what to do. And so the leader's like, all right, let's figure this out, right? The monkey, exactly, jumps from their back to the leader's back. So the leader needs to take fewer monkeys, which, like I said, I know you're really good at that, and just be like, look, that is your job. And so here is a phrase that I suggest that leaders use more often, right? You're a little more direct, figure it out. That's not my problem,
A
right?
little more. Yeah.
But but another phrase that you might use is, I trust your judgment.
Yeah. I learned that from you. That was in the consultation that we had when you came to me, and I was like, well, what do I say? And it was two lines of therapy. One was, I used to say I don't care, and my therapist said, no, you're supposed to say it makes no difference to me. And the other one is, I trust your judgment. So you're empowering them to take ownership of the situation and to solve it. And at first, it's a little scary as a CEO of an organization to say I trust your judgment. But if without doing that, you're not creating that culture of accountability where they take responsibility. And then those monkeys, if I don't do that, then the monkeys jump onto my back. I have a shirt. I can't remember the name of it. Maybe Devin will find it. But it's like, not my circus, not my monkeys. But that made me think of it. It's an old Polish saying, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's a great saying. Now, another thing that has to be clear, if I trust your judgment feels a little nerve-wracking, right? There might be some reasons for that. So the first thing that you have to make sure is that the employees know the limits of their role, right? These are my responsibilities, but outside these responsibilities, I need to get input, right?
Right.
So I had a client once who was like, yeah, we tried that. And then somebody went and spent $3 million without anybody's permission. It's like, okay, well, you weren't really clear
Right.
about
Yeah.
the limits of their responsibility, right? So being clear. Also, there are times when you don't trust their judgment. And sometimes those reasons are valid and sometimes they're not so valid. So you might not trust their judgment because they're new, and that's fine. But you need to put parameters. You don't want people to get used to this idea that every time I need help, you just help me, right? You need to be clear, like, no, this is only happening because you're brand new, right? So for example, you might say something like, in your first week on the job, I will be available for any problem you have. You can come to me. I'll make myself available as long as I'm not in a meeting. But in your second week on the job, we'll have 3 1-hour meetings, and you're going to have to hold all your questions to Monday, Wednesday, or Friday at 10 a.m., where I will clear my calendar for you and we'll go through everything. But in your third week on the job, I expect you to take responsibility, and I'll have the same meeting cadence with you that I have with everybody else, which is once every 2 weeks or once a month or whatever it is, right? So just so they don't get used to, but this is how it's always been. Every time I have a question, you help me. Well,
Right.
That's only because you were brand new, right? So that's the first thing. You have to put parameters around their responsibility. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is, they've been there for a while, but you just don't trust their judgment. Well, now you have 2 options. It's either you're a control freak and you need to let go a little bit ask a peer.
She's talking
ask a
hypothetically, everybody, for the listeners here. She's not talking to me. Okay. So
Hypothetically.
number one, in your business, you're either a control freak and you have to let go. Keep going.
Right. Or there is something about that person that is a problem that you are not solving. You are just burying. So,
Right.
for example, I had a sales manager that I was working with, and he said, oh yeah, I have this salesperson copy me on every single email that he sends because I don't trust him. And I was like, well, that sounds like you're doing your job and his job. And he was like, yeah, but I can't avoid it. I said, why can't you avoid it? He said, well, his writing skills are horrible. And I'm embarrassed every time I read his emails if I don't proof it first. I was like, A, your job is not to be a proofreader. B, why don't you just send him to a business writing skills class and upgrade his skills so that you don't have to read all of your messages and all of his messages. So if you see if there's a real problem, like not everybody's not good at everything, right? This person sold a whole lot of money, but didn't have great writing skills. So fix that, or get some proofreader or something, put some Upwork person on, give them a stipend of a couple $100 a month to have a proofreader that isn't you proofread that stuff, and that will solve the problem. So if there's a valid reason why you don't trust their judgment, it's the boss's job to fix that, right? Identify the skills gaps and fill them. That's what needs to be done.
Yeah, those are great takeaways. I'm sure all our listeners can identify if you look at their team and they look at their staff and they look at the characteristics that are necessary for each position to be successful, and then they can rate them, they can find those skills gaps. A couple more questions. So I know you've got some bonuses in your book, so I want you to be thinking about that. And I will put links in the description for where people can get your book and where they can get the bonuses also. But the last question before that is, okay, so work-life balance, burnout, that's an issue right now. I mean, because people are busy being busy, and we know that people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses, and then they leave toxic cultures and all those things. So what are some examples that a leader can do to lead by example and help avoid burnout, as well as create a culture where their employees can avoid the burnout too?
Yeah. So the first thing that goes back to attention management, right? If you can't get your work done, if you're constantly distracted all day long and you feel like you have no choice but to allow those distractions, then the unconscious calculation is, well, I just have to do it when nobody's bothering me. Well, the only time people are bothering you is after hours. And so now you're working too much, right? So another thing that you need to do is really define for your team what work-life balance means to you. When you say work-life balance, or when your company talks about work-life balance, what exactly does that mean? Because it means different things to different people. And in the book, I identify a couple of the most common things. So some people say, I've better work-life balance if I work from home. But what they really mean is it's more convenient for me to work at home. I could throw in a load of laundry,
Right.
in the middle of my work day, or I could prep dinner, or I could run out and pick up the kids. Well, that's not work-life balance. That's just convenience, right?
Makes sense.
To me, the definition of work-life balance that I recommend my clients use is really simple. And the answer is, don't work too much. For most office staff, the number one reason for burnout is simply that they work too many hours. And so work-life balance just means don't work too much. And if you wonder what too much means, studies show it's somewhere between 38 and 45 hours for optimal happiness, optimal productivity. Because in fact, over 50 hours, productivity actually starts to go down, which seems counterintuitive, but that's what the research shows. So on average, now there are times when we have to work 60 hours, right? 70 hours. It's just the truth. Every business has crunch times, but those crunch times have to be followed by periods of lighter schedules so that there's an up and down, because if it's always up, that's just toxic. And that's when people get burned out.
But don't you think it also goes back to productivity? I know for me, I've continued to get better at productivity with my calendar, with my scheduling, because, if you've read Gino Wickman's book on the EOS operating system, entrepreneur operating system, he talks about integrators versus visionaries. And, visionaries are the idea, the creative, the innovative people, and the integrators are the people that get things done. And I think for me, as a business owner with my employees, I don't want them to work more hours. I want them to be more effective at what they do. So to me, it's not efficient. I don't want them working, I hate clock watchers. I mean, the people who sit at their desk till my day at 5 o'clock and they leave right at 5. I'm like, I don't mind if you leave right at time. I don't want you to work overtime, but I want you to be efficient. And also, if someone has to come in early and stay late, well, then I want to look at why. Why is that happening? I don't want you to get burned out. I had 2 employees come in over the weekend and worked on a website project because they needed to get it done. And I haven't had a chance to talk to them both yet to say, what was it that caused that? And that's okay if it's an exception, but I don't want that to be the rule, otherwise they will get burned out, right? So I want people who are effective versus efficient. If they can produce the results, I don't want them worried about the clock. And then I want to create a system for identifying the challenges for burnout, because again, it's a mindset. And I think it goes back to hiring the right people. I mean, there's a lot we're unpacking in this short little episode today on Fordify, but I think it's hiring the right people, training them to standard, and doing what you've said with attention management and creating the communication guidelines from the leadership down to really, and these are all things that I'm repeating so that my team can hear it and we can do it, because again, it's not just the leadership. You got to have the executive leadership on board too, to help make that part of the culture and to really take that action. So on this new book, again, I'm going to go back and read the title because I got it right in front of me. It's Everybody Wants to Work Here. Attract the best talent, energize your team, and be the leader in your market. Boy, great copywriting there. I don't know where you got that from, but that was really great copy. And so I know the book's available on Amazon, but tell me about these bonuses. What can people, if they get the book and they go back to Maura Thomas, where can they go, or what's the URL they can go to get some bonuses, tip sheets, downloads, bonus videos, whatever you have? What are you going to give them, and where do they go to get it?
Yeah. You said 2 really important things.
Yeah,
though.
Go back to it. Go back. I won't forget.
So one thing you talked about was another thing that you did great, right? When people are show up on the weekends, most bosses' response is, oh, they're so dedicated. That's fantastic. And that's what employees think their bosses are going to say. But if they can't get their work done during the workday, you're right. It's a problem to be solved. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what's wrong.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. What's going on here that we can't get our work done? So rather than sort of encouraging that behavior of working too much, a better response is, help me understand why the work can't get done during the workday and why you feel like you need. And the answer to that usually is that most people just simply don't have the workflow management skills. And that's why
the biggest thing I can say with us. It's workflow management skills for sure. Whoops. That's really great. Turn that off. Sorry. So much for a live episode here with the phone ringing. So
attention management is one piece of workflow management, right?
Okay.
Employees just need to understand the reasons why, understand the habits and behaviors they need to be successful in a 24/7, fast-paced, technology-rich business environment that we live in now.
Yeah. And I would say that if you're an employee listening to this and you work in an organization, if you want to make an impact on your boss, staying late isn't the way to do it. It's coming in early. If you show now listen, here's where you can disagree with this, but if someone comes in a little bit early to get a jump start on something, it shows more initiative than if they stay late. I'm just saying that if you're an employee working in an organization and you work extra hours, you may look at how can you shift that to show the initiative that you're trying to solve the problem, and then communicate to your leader, look, here's what I'm doing to solve this, as opposed to staying late thinking, well, I'm going to get brownie points because I'm staying late. Again, I like it when my team stays a little bit after 5. I know that they care. I'm not expecting them to stay till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, although when they have, because my team is all salaried, I want it to be a give and take. I want it to be flexible enough that they can then know, okay, they can come in a little earlier, a little later the next day, and so forth. And for full disclosure for this, yes, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it's a duck. So my employees are salaried. They don't get paid overtime for that extra work. It is strictly a salaried position, but I also want it to be fair enough to where, like when I took my team to the IF International Franchise Convention, they had 3 days. Well, then I'm going to give 2 days extra because they worked on a Saturday and Sunday, a vacation that they get to add on and to balance that out.
Exactly. So the idea is that there's a difference. Dedication to your job is fantastic.
Right.
I would not suggest that anybody shouldn't be dedicated to their job.
Right.
But here's the thing. There's a difference between a workaholic and a high performer. You want high performers on your team. You don't necessarily want workaholics on your team. And that's the difference.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Well, I really appreciate you joining again. If you're listening to the podcast, it's Maura Thomas, MauraThomas.com. Where can they go to get these bonuses?
Yes. Okay. So the initials of the book, right? Everyone wants to work here. EWTWH. So it's MauraThomas.com, EWTWH. Everyone wants to work here. And that's where they can order the book and get the bonuses.
So they can order it there and they can opt in there to, or do they order it from you to get the bonuses? If they will buy the book on Amazon, can they go there and opt in?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So Maura, after this episode goes live and after you get back for your next trip, reach out to us. Let's make sure your landing page has the ability, because here's what you want. And this, we're going to switch to marketing and we'll wrap this show up. When an author does a bonus, the reason they do that is to build the list so that the next time, like how many books have you published so far? Aren't you on number 5 or whatever? 6. Okay. So the reason you do an offer or an opt-in to get bonuses, everybody, is so that you can, 1, give the bonuses and add more value to the person who bought the book. But 2, now you have a list that you can then market and pre-sell the next book or the next offer, the next webinar, right?
That's one reason. Yeah.
And then the other reason is that on Amazon, when people buy the book, you don't get their names. So I encourage it in the book and if they buy the book, there's a link to where they can get it in the book, right? So hopefully there is. If not, you'll update that so that when someone buys the book, like if you buy my books off Amazon, it says, here's where you go to get the bonuses. It's, /toolkit or whatever the link is. And then they get to opt in and then they get the bonuses. But now I know who bought the book on Amazon so that I can then continue the relationship with. So everybody, we go live on Fordify. Join us Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and then we're actually live on Twitter too. Well, I really appreciate you sharing these insights today and putting up with me as you always do. And you always have great insights for me and my team. She has worked with our team to improve productivity and performance. It's not time management. We all learned it's attention management. So those people that are fixated on time management, let it go. It's wrong. You've got to get Maura's other book on attention management or bring her into your organization, have her speak, because she's also an amazing keynote speaker and also works with organizations and associations and does on-site training. Anyway, that's it for now, Maura. Thank you so much for joining me on Fordify Live.
Happy to be here.